It was an ordinary Tuesday morning in the bustling city of Oak Ridge. The streets hummed with life, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the corner cafes as people hurried to work. Amid the chaos, a man in his mid-50s adjusted his baseball cap and glanced at his reflection in a shop window. The disguise was simple: a pair of wire-rimmed glasses, a slightly disheveled jacket, and a posture that screamed inconspicuous. To the world, he was just another face in the crowd, but in reality, he was Evan Carter, the CEO of one of the nation's largest retail chains, Brightmart. Evan's heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. For years, he'd built Brightmart from a single store into a household name, a retail giant boasting over 1,000 locations nationwide. Yet, behind the polished boardroom presentations and glowing quarterly reports, Evan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he'd lost touch with the lifeblood of his business: the everyday employees and customers who walked through his stores. Today, he was here to change that. Armed with a hidden camera and a fabricated backstory, Evan was going undercover to experience Brightmart from the ground up. The store he chose for his mission wasn't random. It was store number 452, located in the heart of a suburban shopping plaza. On paper, it was an average performer, not the best, not the worst. But recent employee surveys had flagged it for issues with morale and customer service. Evan wanted to see for himself what was happening on the front lines. He wasn't just here to observe, he was here to understand. The automatic doors slid open, and Evan stepped inside. The store was bright and clean, with rows of neatly stocked shelves stretching as far as the eye could see. The faint hum of fluorescent lights blended with the soft pop music playing overhead. A few early shoppers meandered through the aisles, their carts rattling against the linoleum floors. Evan's eyes scanned the scene, taking in every detail. This was his world, his creation, but today he was a stranger in it. As he wandered through the aisles, Evan played his part to perfection. He stopped to inspect products, fiddled awkwardly with a shopping list, and even pretended to be lost. It didn't take long for him to notice the subtle cracks in the store's facade. A spill in the cereal aisle had been left unattended. A stack of promotional flyers sat untouched on a counter. And the employees, though busy, seemed disconnected, their smiles forced and fleeting. Evan's plan was simple: blend in and see how the team treated an ordinary customer. He approached a young employee stocking shelves in the home goods section. Her name tag read Leela, and she couldn't have been more than 20. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and her expression was one of quiet concentration as she arranged a row of candles. Evan cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he began, his voice deliberately hesitant. "Could you help me find the coffee makers?" Leela barely looked up. "It should be in aisle 7, she said, her tone polite but distracted. Evan nodded and made his way to aisle 7, only to find himself staring at a wall of toasters and blenders. No coffee makers in sight. He couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. Was this how customers were treated in his stores? He decided to try again. This time, he approached a middle-aged man rearranging a display of light bulbs. His name tag read Darren, and he exuded an air of impatience, as though he had more important things to do. Evan repeated his question, keeping his tone as polite as possible. Darren let out a sigh and gestured vaguely toward the back of the store. "Probably somewhere near the appliances. Just look around," he said before turning back to his task. Evan's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. He wandered toward the back of the store, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. Was this really the level of service his customers were receiving? He couldn't help but wonder how many shoppers had left Brightmart stores feeling the same way: ignored, unimportant, and unvalued. Just as he was about to give up, he spotted another employee near the checkout counters. Her name tag read Mia, and she was busy scanning items for a customer. There was something different about her demeanor. She moved with purpose, her smile genuine as she chatted with the shopper in front of her. Ivan decided to wait until she was free. When Mia finished, Ivan approached her cautiously. "Excuse me," he began. "I'm having a hard time finding the coffee makers. Could you point me in the right direction?" Mia's eyes lit up with a warmth that caught Ivan off guard. "Of course," she said. "They're actually on the other side of the store, near the seasonal section. I can show you." Before Ivan could protest, Mia set down the basket she was holding and led him across the store. Along the way, she made small talk, asking if he was shopping for himself or a gift. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and for a moment, Ivan forgot about his undercover mission. He was simply a customer being helped by a dedicated employee. When they reached the coffee makers, Mia took the time to explain the differences between the models, pointing out features and price points. Ivan listened intently, his mind racing. This was the kind of service he envisioned when he started Brightmart: personal, attentive, and sincere. But why was Mia the exception rather than the rule? As Mia finished her explanation, Ivan thanked her and watched as she returned to her duties. He couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe all wasn't lost. But just as he was about to leave, something happened that made his stomach drop. From across the store, he heard a raised voice. "Hey, are you going to do your job or what?" Ivan turned to see a man, another employee, judging by his uniform, berating Leela, the young woman he'd spoken to earlier. The man's tone was harsh, his words cutting. Customers stopped to stare, and Leela's face turned bright red as she stammered an apology. Ivan's heart pounded in his chest. This was more than just a case of poor service or low morale. Something was deeply wrong in his store, and he was determined to get to the bottom of it. But how could he confront the truth without blowing his cover? And what would he do if the problems ran deeper than he'd imagined? The answers would have to wait. For now, Ivan was left standing in the middle of his own store, grappling with a mix of anger, sadness, and determination. He'd come here to observe, but what he found was far more than he'd bargained for. And as he watched Leela's shoulders slump under the weight of her manager's scorn, Ivan knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Ivan stood frozen in place, his mind racing as he watched the scene unfold. The manager, whose name tag read Todd, continued his tirade, his voice echoing through the aisles. "I told you to finish the display an hour ago. Now look at this mess. Do you even know what you're doing?" Leela's eyes darted around, clearly aware of the growing audience. She stammered something inaudible, her hands trembling as she tried to explain. But Todd wasn't interested in listening. He crossed his arms and glared at her with an intensity that made Ivan's blood boil. The CEO had always prided himself on fostering a culture of respect and teamwork. But what he was witnessing now was the complete opposite. Ivan knew he couldn't intervene directly without risking his cover, but his frustration was mounting. He decided to stay close, observing every detail of the interaction. Todd eventually stormed off, leaving Leela to pick up the pieces, both literally and figuratively. She knelt down to reorganize the display Todd had criticized, her face flushed with embarrassment. A couple of customers whispered to each other before walking away, clearly uncomfortable. Ivan's thoughts raced as he tried to piece together the dynamics of the store. Why was Todd behaving this way? Was this an isolated incident, or was it symptomatic of a larger problem? He decided he needed to gather more information before drawing any conclusions. Over the next hour, he wandered through the store, discreetly watching the interactions between employees and customers. The pattern was undeniable. While a few staff members, like Mia, went out of their way to provide excellent service, others seemed disengaged or even hostile. And Todd's behavior wasn't an outlier. Ivan overheard him snapping at another employee near the stockroom, his tone dripping with condescension. In the break room, Ivan found a quiet corner to collect his thoughts. The walls were adorned with motivational posters featuring phrases like "teamwork makes the dream work" and customer first. But the atmosphere didn't match the slogans. A few employees sat at the tables, their conversations hushed and guarded. Ivan couldn't help but notice the tension in the room, a palpable sense of unease that seemed to hang over the team like a cloud. It didn't take long for Ivan to strike up a conversation with one of the employees. A young man named Jake, who looked like he was barely out of high school, was nursing a cup of coffee in the corner. Ivan introduced himself under his alias, pretending to be a new hire. Jake seemed hesitant at first, but eventually opened up. "This place used to be great," Jake admitted, dancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "But ever since Todd took over as manager, things have gone downhill. He's always on our case, and it feels like nothing we do is ever good enough. A lot of people have quit because of him." Ivan frowned. "Why hasn't anyone reported him?" Jake shrugged. "Who are we supposed to tell? The district manager only shows up once in a blue moon, and when he does, Todd makes sure everything looks perfect. Plus, most of us can't afford to lose this job. We just put up with it." The weight of Jake's words hit Ivan hard. He'd always believed in the systems he put in place to address employee concerns, but it was clear they weren't working, at least not here. He thanked Jake for his honesty and promised to keep the conversation between them. As he left the break room, Ivan's determination grew stronger. He couldn't stand by and let this toxic environment persist. The turning point came later that afternoon. Ivan was browsing near the electronics section when he noticed a commotion near the entrance. A woman with 2 young children was arguing with Todd. From what Ivan could gather, she'd been overcharged for an item and was requesting a refund. Todd's response was curt and dismissive. "I've already explained it to you," he said, his tone dripping with impatience. "If you don't have the receipt, there's nothing I can do." The woman's face turned red with frustration. "I'm not asking for charity. I just want what I paid for," she said, her voice cracking. One of their children began to cry, adding to the chaos. Other customers stopped to watch, their expressions ranging from curiosity to discomfort. Ivan couldn't stay silent any longer. Stepping forward, he addressed Todd directly. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his tone calm but firm. "Is there a way we can help this customer? I'm sure there's a solution." Todd turned to Ivan, his eyes narrowing. "Who are you exactly?" he asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Ivan hesitated for a split second, realizing he was treading dangerous territory. "Just another customer," he said finally, "but it seems like this situation could be handled better." The tension in the air was palpable. Todd looked like he was about to snap, but before he could respond, Mia appeared. "I'll take care of it," she said quickly, stepping between Todd and the customer. She guided the woman and her children to the customer service desk, her demeanor calm and professional. Ivan watched as Mia resolved the issue with grace, her kindness diffusing the situation. As the woman left the store, gratitude evident on her face, Ivan's admiration for Mia grew. She was the kind of employee who embodied everything Brightmart stood for. But her actions also highlighted the stark contrast between her approach and Todd's. It was clear to Ivan that while the store had its bright spots, the underlying issues couldn't be ignored. Ivan left the store that evening with a heavy heart. The day had been eye-opening, revealing both the strengths and weaknesses of his company. But the most troubling realization was that the problems in store number 452 weren't unique. If this was happening here, how many other stores were struggling in silence? Ivan knew he had to act, but the question was how. Exposing Todd's behavior would be a start, but true change would require a deeper look at the company's culture and practices. As he drove away, Ivan's mind raced with possibilities. He'd come here to understand the challenges his employees faced, but what he'd found was a system in need of repair. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Ivan was determined to make things right. Not just for store number 452, but for every Brightmart employee and customer. And as the city lights blurred past his car window, one thought lingered in his mind. The real work was just beginning. A tense silence hung in the air, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and distant footsteps. Emma's heart raced as she crouched in the shadows, clutching the flash drive that held the evidence they had risked everything to uncover. Behind her, Liam gestured for her to stay low as he scanned the dimly lit corridor for any sign of their pursuers. Their mission had gone far beyond what they initially imagined, and the stakes had never been higher. The truth about the corporation's illegal experiments wasn't just a scandal. It was a ticking time bomb threatening countless lives. Emma had thought exposing the corruption would be enough, but now she realized the danger was far more immediate. The experiments weren't just theoretical, they were active, and the fallout could spiral out of control within hours. Suddenly, a loud clatter echoed from the far end of the hall. Emma's eyes widened as two armed guards turned the corner, their shadows stretching ominously toward her and Liam. Adrenaline surged through her veins as she whispered, "We need to move. Now." Liam nodded, pulling her to her feet. They sprinted down the corridor, their footsteps muffled by the worn carpet. Emma clutched the flash drive tighter, knowing that every step brought them closer to both salvation and potential disaster. Behind them, the guards shouted, their voices growing louder with each second. There was no time to hesitate. As they reached the stairwell, a sudden explosion shook the building. The force threw them off balance, and Emma's ears rang as debris rained down. Liam helped her up, his voice urgent but steady. "They're trying to destroy the evidence. We have to get to the server room before it's too late." Emma nodded, determination replacing her fear. Together, they pushed forward, navigating the crumbling structure. When they finally reached the server room, the door was guarded by a high-tech security panel. Emma's fingers flew across the keyboard, hacking into the system with practiced precision. Every second felt like an eternity as the guards' footsteps grew closer. Just as the door hissed open, the guards rounded the corner. Liam stepped in front of Emma, shielding her as he engaged them in a desperate fight. Emma's hands trembled, but she forced herself to focus, inserting the flash drive into the main server. The screen lit up, displaying the damning evidence. With a few quick commands, she uploaded the files to a secure network, ensuring the truth would reach the public no matter what happened next. "It's done," she shouted, turning to see Liam struggling against one of the guards. Without thinking, she grabbed a fallen pipe and swung it with all her strength, knocking the guard unconscious. Liam gave her a grateful nod, and together they fled the room as another explosion rocked the building. They barely made it outside before the entire structure collapsed in a deafening roar. Emma and Liam collapsed onto the pavement, coughing and gasping for air. In the distance, sirens wailed as emergency responders arrived, drawn by the chaos. Emma looked at Liam, her face smudged with soot but filled with relief. "We did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with exhaustion. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. The evidence had gone viral, sparking outrage and immediate action from authorities. The corporation's leaders were arrested, their operations shut down for good. Victims of the experiments began to receive the help they desperately needed, and public pressure ensured that regulations would be tightened to prevent such atrocities in the future. As Emma sat on a park bench, watching the sunrise with Liam by her side, she finally allowed herself to breathe. The weight of their journey was heavy, but so was the hope it had brought. Liam broke the silence, his voice soft but resolute. "You know, we changed the world." Emma smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "Maybe. But more importantly, we gave people a chance to fight for themselves. That's what matters." The two of them sat quietly, the warmth of the sun cutting through the lingering chill of the night. Their battle was over, but the ripple effects of their actions would continue to unfold, a testament to the power of courage and the relentless pursuit of justice.